Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so we can focus on this image. And I'm also going to reduce the opacity of this layer to about 40% so that we can see a nice mix of the pattern and the image in the background, which I'd like to trace. Now notice, for what it's worth, that I changed the opacity of this layer just by pressing the 4 key, which changed the opacity value here inside the Layers palette to 40%. And that works when the Marquee tool is active, as it is right now. And then I'm going to press Command-Shift-N or Control-Shift-N on the PC in order to create yet another new layer, and I'm going to call this my painting layer, because this is where I'm going to paint brush strokes. And it's always a good idea to paint on separate layers from your imagery so that you have the flexibility to move things around, erase brush strokes that turn out to be mistakes, and even modify the opacity and the blend modes after you get done brushing on the layer. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do in this case. Now you don't have to, obviously. If you just want to experiment with the brushes on a flat, empty image, you're certainly welcome to do so. Or you can just watch what I'm up to here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the OK button, and notice that I now have a new painting layer. Now I'm going to switch to the brush tool, the immensely improved brush tool inside Photoshop 7. I'll go ahead and click to select that tool. Now, if you're familiar with Photoshop 6, you might look at the options bar and you might say, well, things really haven't changed that much so far. I still have my brush shape settings that I can use. And if I want to select some other brush shape, I just click on this down pointing arrowhead. But notice now that you have all of these strokes that Photoshop is showing you. And I can resize this palette too if I want to show more of these strokes at a time. And Photoshop's showing me this long list of different brush strokes I can apply. And these down here are some of the custom brushes that Photoshop provides by default. And if that's not enough, click this right pointing arrowhead and you'll see toward the bottom of this pop-up menu here, you've got just a ton of additional brush libraries that you can choose from. And every one of these is going to give you access to dozens of additional brushes. For example, if I choose thick, heavy brushes, Photoshop is going to ask me, do I want to append these brushes to my existing list, or do I want to replace the brushes that are currently open? Well, by all means, if you want to have ready access to as many brushes as you can, click on the Append button to just add those brushes to the bottom of your list. So there you have it. Now, if that's all you could do inside Photoshop was select from a bunch of presets, that would be fantastic. Turns out you can do much more than that. You can design your own brushes, and you can save them for later use. How do you do that? Well, I'm going to click this down pointing arrowhead to put that palette away, and I'm going to press the F5 key, on your keyboard to bring up the Brushes palette. Now, you can also choose the Brushes command from the window menu if you prefer. Now, right off the bat, we have access to a lot of options that have been available inside Photoshop for some time now. For example, you can select from one of the predefined brushes inside this list. You can adjust the diameter of the brush to make it either thicker or thinner if you like. I'm going to set it to about 40, probably works for my purposes. You can change the roundness of the brush so it's elliptical by dragging these little circular icons. I can drag the arrowhead to rotate the brush to get a calligraphic effect. I can increase the hardness value to get a sharper stroke or reduce the value for a softer stroke. And I can change the spacing too. Now the great thing here, spacing's been available inside Photoshop for a long time. Few people have known how to use it, however, but now that Photoshop 7 provides you this last option inside the Brushes palette, the Brush Preview, it becomes extremely obvious what the spacing value does. Watch as I increase the spacing value, you see the dollops of paint start to spread apart. And if I reduce the spacing value, they get closer and closer together. So this wonderful preview at the bottom of the palette is indispensable. It gives you an idea as you're working through this wealth of options, these multiple panels of options, exactly what it is you're doing when you adjust each slider or numerical value or what have you.